Okay, we're continuing with Siman Kuf Ayin Aleph. Sorry for the delay on this. We hope to finish the Choshen Mishpat Shiurim before the test and whatever is relevant to these Simanim. Because of the pressure and time, we're going to be jumping around a little bit. But now we're going to be going through Sif Hey, Vav, Zayin, Ches, and Kuf Ayin Aleph. Hey concludes the inyan of Din Chalukah. Vav, Zayin, Ches, Din deal with good Ayagud. I'm just going to go through the details which are relevant, and there's a lot to cover. Try to go a little bit faster than usual. In Sif Hey, the Mechaber writes, when you split a house or a chatzar that has a din chalukah, each one is supposed to receive enough that the one should not have to go through his friend's area to be able to enter and exit. What is din chalukah? That's in the chatzar. One should not go through somebody else. What's din chalukah in the bias? The Mechaber doesn't write. The Shach tells you look in the Mabit, and what does the Mabit actually say? The Mabit says, brings in the Mukhi Yosef, there's a Machlekes HaPoskim regarding Chalukah, Din Chalukah when it comes to a house. If you need Dalad al Dalad, like by a Chatzar, you need more than that. If you look in the Avnei Choshen says, being that it's a Machlekes, it's a Safek, so Chalukah, which is a Din, is better than Good Ayagud, which is a Takana. But there's no Achra, what's the minimum amount that you need in a house?
Well, the Mabit says Dalad.
The Mabit
says Dalad.
He brings in the Mukhi Yosef, it's a Machlekes HaPoskim, do you need Dalad al Dalad? That's the minimum, or you need more than that for a house? The Dalad al Dalad is only for a Chatzah. That's what there's no achra in the Mabit. And the Shach tells you to look in the Mabit, means the Shach is not machriya either. Now, the Erech Lechem writes on this that if one person is going to have to spend money to be able to create a pathway to be able to go through the Chatzar, because the Chatzar has, right now, the Chatzar has one path. If they're going to do Chalukah, it's going to work in such a way that one person is not going to be able to access it. It's no longer considered yesh by din chalukah if a person has to spend extra money for it. Now, l'cha'ira, according to Svara, a person has to spend extra money on it, so maybe they should split the costs of spending, or the other person wants the chalukah should spend it. But without it, if there's no agreement on the payment, Erech Lechem says that there is no din chalukah. What's nafkamina if you have a big house which has a bunch of rooms and you want to split the house is only one door. To be able to create a second unit, to split a house into a second unit, you have to create a second doorway, you have to create a second way to do it. So this is where the Erech Lechem's din would kick in. So it's important to know Zerech Lechem, because that will be the real nafkamin will be if somebody wants the chalukah, he should be the one who would have to pay for the renovations. The mashmos Zerech Lechem doesn't say that. There's no din chalukah, means if the person who wants the chalukah is going to have to pay the expenses that to be able to create the chalukah.
And if he does, then he can force the other guy to split?
Yeah, once it becomes din chalukah, yeah.
You can't say you're changing the house now, it's the new...
No, it makes another doorway, it makes another entryway. He says, no, there's an entryway. That could be, or maybe not. You can say, I don't want the second door, it's ugly. I don't know, that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure exactly what the Erech Lechem of the Maskan. To me, it looks like it would just mean that the person has to pay for it. That person would have to pay for it. The Ramav here adds a few more dinim to it. What does it mean? What else? What other conditions do you need when you have to split it? First of all, that you could use in your part that you're getting now, you could use whatever you're able to use prior to that, which means if there's a bathroom over there, you're able to use the bathroom. If there's an entranceway, you're able to use the entranceway. If you're talking about today, you could say if the sinks or whatever else is in the house that each person needs, you could do it. Based on that, now the Erech HaShulchan over here adds on to it, in the name of the Rashbats, that if it's in a way if there is a way to split something, let's say there's a bathroom, and there's a way to split the house in a way that both people have access to the bathroom, there's 2 doors to the bathroom, then that's also considered, then it's considered din chalukah. That's what the Ramah says, that there's no din chalukah, that each person, that you have to have, that each person should be able to use it. It means that it's impossible to split it in such a way that both people should be able to use it. But if it doesn't mean that you have to have 2 bathrooms, it means that you have to have access, that both should be able to continue using it like it was before. But that's what the Erech HaShulchan says in the name of the Tashbetz. However, the Mata Shimon says, no, the majority of, he says, Roiv Binyan of the Poskim hold that each person needs his own Beis HaKisei. Once they split, it's no longer Beis HaKisei B'Shutfus, and if there's no 2 Beis HaKiseis, then there is no Din Chalukah. Back again to what I said before, l'chayre, we could argue that if a person wants to do a chalukah, build a bathroom for the other person, maybe he will then be able to do a chalukah.
What's different? Either way, they both use the bathroom. Nothing changed.
Yeah, but they're no longer shutfim, so they don't want to use the bathroom together anymore. They're going to start fighting who pays for the toilet paper, so who pays for the water. The second thing that Amos says is that if the value of the house or whatever is going to split is going to lose more than 20% of its value because of the separation, more than the chaimish, then you can't force the other person to do the split and lose money out of it, Trumas Hadeshin. And the Ulam HaMishpat says from it, mashma, that if the loss is less than 20%, less than the chaimish, you could, Bezin could force a split. This is something which is much more common than before when it comes to splitting if you lose or not. There is concept, certain lots, certain properties are worth a lot more when they're combined. If somebody owns 2 or 3 houses that are attached, someone owns, let's say, a house which just sits on a double lot, somebody could buy it and build a building over there in Brooklyn. That's what the excitement is. If 2 people own it together and each person wants to do this, for sure it's din chalukah. Question is, are you going to lose by chalukah? You might be losing of it, but you're not losing right now. You're losing later. This is where the Bezin's brains and intellect have to kick in and see whether this is something where din chalukah would apply, or something where it would lavdafka apply, and you would say that you cannot force a chalukah. Maybe it makes more sense to force a sale, or a gudayagud, or whatever it is. But din chalukah, which is the discussions later on, but din chalukah would be, this is something which the Bezdin should use, like I said, use its seichel to calculate, because sometimes the property is worth more when it's combined. Sometimes, if it's not a building place, sometimes the property is worth more if you could split it into lots. If somebody has a big lot and it's a block where you cannot build buildings, and if you have 1 lot, you could build on it 3 houses, but if you could split the lots now, you could make 5 lots out of it because there's minimum size of lots, and you could build 5 houses on it, you might be able to make more money by splitting it, then you have to look at it. So this is, Bezdin has to be not just people who know Choshen Mishpat, but also either know value, or at least know that if they don't know something, they have to know that they should be asking somebody. Now, interesting is that there's a machlokes if you look at the hefsed now, or you look at the hefsed that's going to be later. This is machlokes Mahariyaz Enzin, Siman Chav Gimel says that you look at now. If there is now a loss, then the Ramaz din kicks in. If there is no loss now, then nothing. We don't look at what's going to be down the line. If they would want to sell it as a combined lot, it would have been worth more. And the Chesed Lavram, that's they're both brought in Divrei Geonim, but the Divrei Geonim is machriya like a Chesed Lavram, that you do consider also a future loss. You don't only consider the current loss, you look also at the future. If they would be able to sell it down the line for more, that is, and it would be 20%, more than 20% difference, then that's already enough to prevent a chalukah. The Pesach Tshuva brings the Chasam Sofer, which says that the Chasam Sofer Bichlal disagrees on this whole concept of the Ramah. In specific cases, the Chasam Sofer brings, but from that you see is Kav, that we're talking about Yerishim that Yerid were Yerish from their father. Because what's good or Yagud? What's Din Chalukah or whatever it is, it's L'chayra, the Machlekes when the guy, when Shutfim, but by Yerishim, it's a Kuli Alma, there's Chalukah, there's good or Yagud, there's everything else. Yeah, so because good Yagud there's Machlekes if it applies by Shutfim or not, but by Yerishim, the Kuli Alma, say good Yagud, say Chalukah. So when you have, what's the purpose of a Yerusha? By Yerusha, when the father gives a lot to his kids, obviously it's meant to be split. If he has 5 kids, he was planning on it to be split. So it's Oymid L'Ischalek. So whether there is a hefsed or there is no hefsed, you can't do that consideration bichlal. Only by shutfim, where there was not made for that purpose, that's when we kick in this din of the Ramah kicks in, that we do not say chalukah, but we would say gudei yogurt, so we don't say the shutfim, when the shutfim joined together, they joined together for the purpose of making profit, not for losing. Well? Huh?
He's talking about the Gershon.
And what's the Ramah talking about?
The Ramah is only talking about partners, only talking about Shutman.
Why was the Ramah not talking about Yerishim?
But it could be by Gershon, the Ramah would agree that people...
But the Ramah then would say that specifically the majority of the Siman is talking about Yerishim, not about... because it's the default of the Siman is Yerishim. Yerishim is no machlekes. But the Chasam Sofer, like I said, the Chasam Sofer disagrees over here. The Chasam Sofer also says that when it comes to Shutfim, he says that in Shutfim there is Gudei Yagud. This is where the Yesod of the Chasam Sofer, that we say he disagrees on the whole Shutfim, no Gudei Yagud by Shutfim. This is the Chasam Sofer where he says that there is Gudei Yagud by Shutfim, and the Svara, like we said in the last year, that the person wants to, when the person becomes a partner, obviously he becomes a partner for the purpose of that he's going to have Shalom Bayis. And if the Poyel you don't have Shalom Bayis, then we don't say that one person should lose out. And for that you have either Gudei Yagud or Chalukah. Gudei Yagud or Chalukah was created for that, for the scenario that is going to be Shalom Bayis, problems. Now, if both of them want to split, the Chasam Sofer says, obviously we don't have to have any discussion about it, whether one way or the other. It's obvious that if they want to split, we're not going to fight against them and tell them, no, you're shutfim, you're sharing, but you can't split. If they want to split, we're not going to block it. There's an interesting Chesed L'Avram on Cheshimish Patzim Chav Ches, where he says, if you have a land on which you can build a palace, and by splitting it you could only build 2 houses, and that's what it was defined for, it's no longer considered Kedei Chalukah. Lachas Kam V'Kama, if they have a palace, and if you're going to split the palace, it's going to be 2 houses, 2 big houses rather than 1 palace, it's also not Kedei Chalukah, because it's no longer that it has the same definition as it had before. But this is a little bit hard to understand. Huh? Lav dafka mitzad. It could be mitzad value, yeah.
If not, what would we do? Just because the name is not powerful?
Yeah, that's what it looks like from the Chesed L'Avram. That's what I'm saying. It's hard kosher l'holmoy. The next thing that the Ramah says, if there is no din chalukah, but there is a thick wall between the two, that if you would make the wall thinner, then you would have Kedei Chalukah. So if Bezdin sees that by making the wall thinner, it's not going to weaken the wall or do any damage to the wall, then you force a Chalukah. What's interesting from here is that the Ramah does not even acknowledge the fact that thinning down the wall costs money, which means that it doesn't fit with the Derech Lechem we mentioned before, that it goes based on that if there is a financial concern, financial expense to one side, or to both sides, we don't say din chalukah, because over here, it seems like he doesn't mention it b'chol. Huh?
I understood the part is the guy was willing to do it himself.
Depends. Still going to cost some work. Maybe because he wants to do it himself, yeah. Because you can argue both ways.
Or try to not have to thin the wall now.
Huh? You
Thin the wall. As long as the fact that if you would have thinned it, you're not going to thin it right now.
could be, yeah. Didn't think of it that way, but yeah, you could say that once there's a wall that could have been thinned, then it becomes already din chalukah. Yeah. If the next thing that Rama says, if it's din chalukah only if you split it to the width and not to the length, it means north to south and not east to west, or fakert, or whichever way you're going to split it, only din chalukah one way and not the other, then you split it that way, which is a very interesting Rama, because, and the Ulama Mishpat right away points out, that from this we see that Rama holds that you need a square, dalad al dalad has to be square, not the dalad al dalad could fit into this thing. Where do we all know this din from? Everybody knows it from Hilchis Mezuzah. And that's what is Machlekes Mechaber Rama, whether you need how you need the 4x4 calculated. And the Ulama Mishpat says, and therefore he says it's tzarichiyun, if taked this is the mashmos of the Rama or not, but it seems like that's the mashmos of the Rama. The Rama then continues, if one side has buildings, one side does not have buildings, or one side has access to the Reshus Harabim, one side does not have access to the Reshus Harabim, then you instead of breaking how buildings on one side and building on the other to be able to do it or whatever it is, so you calculate the value of the properties, the value of the buildings, the value of that, and then the person who does not receive the buildings will receive more in land to even out the chalukah, so he will receive the value of it. So if the property has 2 buildings in a big lot, and if you'd split it half, the only way to split it, or if there's one big building on one side, you can't really split the building, you would split it, then one person gets the value of the building, and the other person would get a lot more in land to even out whatever the value of the building is. And the Sivis right away explains what does that mean, that you calculate the money. He says he doesn't not like the way I just explained to you, but rather he explains it differently. He says no, you use the mammon to make the other side equal to the first side. That means if through money you could make the other side equal, then you even out what the cheshbon is, and that there should be an expense placed to even out that the second person should also have a building. And he says yesh chalkim.
You give him money, tell you should build a building.
Yeah, and he says right away yesh chalkim. And he says that you can't. He says yeshchalkim and hold that you cannot impose for a chalukah to spend extra money on it. Which
Why wouldn't this apply to
it applies to everything else, huh?
the Shtamshus in the beginning of the Rama?
Also, l'chayro applies the same thing. Fit with erech lachem, yeah. The second shit in the Nesivos, not the first one, yeah. The yeshchalkim, yeah. And the Rama concludes that when they both agree, obviously they could do whatever they want. That means in this concept of having buildings, etc., it seems like the Rama, the Aruch HaShulchan understood that this word line of the Rama, that if they midas shneim, you could do whatever you want, only applies to the last line in the Rama about if there's buildings on one side and not on the other side. And what does the Aruch HaShulchan says? The Rama just wants to teach you. You don't worry about Bal Tashchis if you want to even out one side and the other and knock down a building. That's not considered the din of Bal Tashchis. That's a raya from the Aruch HaShulchan that when you have a purpose for something, then knocking down buildings is not considered Bal Tashchis and Azman Grom and Eretz Yisrael.
Why would you want to do that?
What?
Why would you want to do Bal Tashchis?
Whatever, because they don't want to get into all cheshbonis. Maybe it's an empty building. I don't know. Maybe one guy wants to plant trees, or he doesn't want to go into a whole discussion. Maybe it's going to complicate things. Maybe a person prefers, he doesn't want to have a building with no backyard. He knows if he's going to make the cheshbon, the other person is going to get 80% of the land to even out for the 20% which has a building, and he's going to have a building without a backyard. So he says, you know what, I don't need this little building over here. I prefer to have a big property which down the line I'll be able to do something about it. And with that concludes the dinim of chalukah, and Sivav Zayin Ches starts the dinim of good oy agud. Sivav, the Mechaber starts explaining how does good oy agud work. When does good oy agud kick in? When something which has not done chalukah, or you cannot split it. So one person could say, sell me your part bekach vekach, or buy from me my part for that same price, and he is koy for the other one to sell or to buy. That means I say, sell me your part for whatever, $100,000, or if you don't want to sell me your part for $100,000, you have to buy my part for that price. And the Rama right away adds this, is even if he adds a price that's higher than the value. Now, just want to point out that the simple understanding of Gudei Agud, before we continue weiter, the simple reading of this, of all the din of Gudei Agud that we're talking about, is talking about when there is equal partners. So I say 50-50, so I say buy my part for 100,000, I'll sell me your part for 100, or I'll buy your part for 100, and then one could be paid for the other one. But let's say their partner is 25-75. So a simple way of doing it is that Reuven, who has 75%, let's say, could tell Shimon, you sell me your 25% for, let's say, $25,000. Or buy my 75% for $75,000, let's say if it's $100,000 worth together. Yeah, whichever way the cheshbonos will work. Yeah? Doesn't just, that's the simple, and that's how the Pamoin Zov understands the Mechaber. Pamoin Zov explains the Mechaber that it does not 50-50. It could be 75-25, it could be 80-40, it could be one shutuf, it could be three shutufim, but the Levush doesn't hold like that. The Levush says Gudei Agud only applies when it's 50-50. The Levush says Gudei Agud only applies when it's 50-50. If it's not, then no. And the Pamoin Zov says the Levush makes no sense. Says you can't say Gudei Agud. Says the whole concept of Gudei Agud is when they're equal. What? The Pamoin Zov says makes no sense. And he says, and then he brings from Mishkanei Saroyim that in Tunisia there was a minig that Gudei Agud was only when it's 50-50. Not when it's 2/3, 1/3, 75-25, whatever it is. And the Mishkanei Saroyim says that this is against the Gemara. The Zakan Aaron of Tunisia came out full force against it. The Mishkanei Saroyim also says it makes no sense. The Mishkanei says the Maisa happens to be that it was probably a takana of the place to do that only 50-50 for whatever reason, so people shouldn't let's say buy 25% in a property, or 20% or 5%, and then force a sale on the other person and take the other 95, or whichever way they would do it, if they would know that that's how it is. They'll come with real value. I know a person's a poor person. I go and I tell him, I want to be a shutuf in your property. I'm giving you 10% of your value. Then when they come, I want his house. I'll pay him full price, but I'll take away his house. I'll pay him 90%. So he's not losing anything. He's just losing his house. He's not losing money from it.
I was thinking the other way. Not like having a problem.
Or the other way,
25, the guy's not going to pay for 75.
Right, or also you could do that, yeah. So that.
Those who shouldn't, they rush there, they say you can't.
That was takana. He says, but it's against the Mishnah. The Pamoin Zov brings the Mishnah Saroyim. He says Mishnah Saroyim clearly says it's against the Gemara. It's against the Mechaber. We can't paskin. And that's where the maskana of the Mishnah Saroyim, maskana of Pamoin Zov is. The pashtus lashon Mechaber is not so, and therefore that's how you do it. Lamaisa today, the way we paskin is like the pashtus lashon Mechaber, the Pamoin Zov. That one is the partners. We go 25, 75, whatever it is. We still do Gudei Agud. Now let's go back to the Ramah. The Ramah says that even if it's more, even if a person offers more than the value, Gudei Agud still kicks in, and this is based on the Ramah paskins like the Tur paskins like the Rosh paskins like the Ramah, and the Tur says not like Rabbeinu Yeshaya. The Rabbeinu Yeshaya says that Gudei Agud could only be at value, not more and not less. And the Rabbeinu Yeshaya also says, the Torah also brings the Gainim say that you follow, the Bezdin has to make a calculation how much it's really worth. And if you look at the Beis Yosef over there will explain to you the swara of the machlokas between those that say that you could go higher and those that say that you have to do a calculation. The Beis Yosef it says the machlekas only applies for going higher, but for going lower, he brings from the Ramban that for if you give a low ball price, if you lower price than what it is, then the Kuli Alma there's no Gudei Agud. Happens to be, if you look over there, the Beis Yosef says there's a third way of Gudei Agud. Basically, he splits Rashi from everybody else. He says Rashi's shitta is because until now, what's a simple understanding, and the way the Mechaber and the way the Rambam and the way the Tur, Gudei Agud means one person, the plaintiff, the Teveya, sets the price. So Teveya comes and says, sell me your chelik for 100,000, or I'll buy your chelik for 100,000. The Beis Yosef understands from Rashi that Gudei Agud means Teveya says, sell me your chelik for 100,000, or buy my chelik for 100,000, and the Nitva has then a right to say, no, you sell me your chelik for 125, or I'll buy your chelik for 125 or 75, whatever the number is. Yeah, whichever way he wants to manipulate the price. Yeah, that's how the Beis Yosef understands Rashi, and then at that point the Teveya can no longer come back and argue on the price. That means the Nitva has the upper hand. If the Teveya initiates the process, he cooked his own goose. He says, I'm willing to offer you 100,000 for your part or buy my part for 100,000. Shimon comes back and says, no, I want to buy your part for 75.
But he has to say, good, he has to say, I'll sell you for 75 also.
No, he doesn't. Not the way Beis Yosef understands Rashi. The respondent only has to say how much he buys back. As long as it's not below price, then if you have to go into...
Price, he can say, I'm only selling, not buying.
No, because if the guy, the first person says, I'm willing to... The first person has to say either or, good or good. But the respondent says, no, I'm going to hold it.
He says, I'll sell it to you for more or I'll buy it for less. He doesn't need to say both.
He doesn't have to say both. He could say one or the other, yeah. And the Teveya gets stuck with it. Really, because they're only for holding it. That's the simple way of understanding.
The Nitva doesn't have to bring a double, doesn't have to say...
No, not according to Rashi.
Notice that the Nitva says 120, and he doesn't give the option for the Teveya to do 120.
No. According to the way Beis Yosef understands Rashi, no, the Nitva says, the Nitva just responds, no, I'm going to pay you 75 for it.
Or you could...
Or I'm going. He could say, I'm going to sell you for my part for that price.
He also gives the
We can't do both, huh? He can't give both options. He can't say 75 or 125.
No. I'm saying that if the Nitva says 75,
Yeah.
now the Teveya also has the option to buy it.
No, he doesn't. Not according to Beis Yosef understands Rashi.
Nitva can always just say, I'll buy it from you for $1. I'll buy you for $1.
Yeah, that's how the Prisha understands the Beis Yosef. There's a simple Beis Yosef. When the Prisha says the Beis Yosef makes no sense. The way the Beis Yosef understands Rashi, this way, that makes no sense. And he says it makes no the Prisha says it makes no sense to say that the Nitva could change the price. And he actually explains that Rashi does follow the same opinion, the same understanding as the Rambam and the Rosh, etc. Happens to be the Be'er HaGoyla, an Ois Tzaddik, in a few words, does explain it like the Beis Yosef, that Rashi does hold like that. That Rashi does hold that a Nitva could be kaveh a new price. And the Pischei Tshuva brings from the Chasam Sofer that could be the Nitvoim could say Kimli like Rashi b'Shittas Beis Yosef. And but the Pamayne Zav says that you cannot say Kimli like the Havana of Rashi in the Beis Yosef. The Pamayne Zav is Machriya that way against the Chasam Sofer. The Chasam Sofer, they're both. The Pamayne Zav is in the Blue Book and the Chasam Sofer is in the Pischei Tshuva. You can see it over there. It's a long tshuva in the Chasam Sofer. There was a partnership called Koilel Volin and Koilel Russia, and they had a fight about houses that they used to own together b'shutfus, and they decided that they're going to split, and that's what happened. Now, so let's going to go a bunch of points that are relevant to good or good. If you remember from the previous shir, there are some that say that the whole thing, the Yesod of good or Yagud, that's what the smell over there says that the Yesod of good or Yagud starts from, because if there's no din chalukah, we have hezek, so therefore you can't prevent hezek, therefore you have to say good or Yagud. So if there's no hezek, you don't say good or Yagud. We already know from what the smell says, no, that even when there's no hezek, even though the Yesod of good or Yagud of chalukah is based on Hezekriya, even when there's no Hezekriya, you can still say good or good. When there are shutfim which bought together, we also spoke about it in the previous shir. The machlekes if we say good or good by shutfim or not. Lemaisa there's a machlekes what to do. Could someone say kimli or not? The Erech Shai says, being that it's a suffix, and the Shach brings mentions those opinions, so therefore the Muhzak could say Kimli that there is no good oyagud. But Reb Shlomo Kluger in Mishpat says that no, the achra is that we do say good oyagud even by shutfim, and you cannot say kimli like the opinion that there's no good oyagud by shutfim, because the Shulchan Aruch didn't even bother to mention that opinion. And that's mashma from the Chasam Sofer. Also, you can't say, well, not mashma, it's pretty clear from the Chasam Sofer we mentioned earlier, that the person cannot say, that since the Chasam Sofer passes that there is good yogud by shutfim, he b'chal discounts the opinion there's no good yogud by shutfim. So, and by the way, the Aruch HaShulchan also passes that you cannot say good yogud. You cannot say kimli like the opinion that there's no good yogud by shutfim. Interesting, Aruch HaShulchan. The Meister we say good yogud by shutfim, yeah, for sure. Like Chasam Sofer. And the Aruch HaShulchan. And the only question is, could you say kimli or not? That's the machlekes, do you say kimli or not? Not if we say good yogud by shutfim or not. The question is, could one person, could one of them say kimli? The Aruch HaShulchan says that just like one person could say good yogud against one, so too, if there's 3 shutfim, 2 could say good yogud to one, or 1 could say good yogud to the other 2. Yeah, but that's, so it means there could be a minority owner could force a dissolving of the partnership without any problem through the method of good yogud, because the Aruch HaShulchan paskins is good yogud by shutfim, and he paskins that 1 could say it to a lot, or a lot could say it to 1. So if a bunch of shutfim get into a fight with one of them, they could violently throw him out of the business. The Erech HaShulchan, not the Aruch HaShulchan, the Erech HaShulchan says, brings from the points out over here a point, he adds it, so you know from the Rameh, that once they agree on a good yogud in a specific price, this is brought from the Rameh and mentioned in the Tur, that if you agree to a good yogud in a specific price, the Teveya could always change his mind before there was a kinyan, and could change his mind, maybe he doesn't agree to the price, the Teveya. He could also change from good to agud or fakert. And the Erech HaShulchan adds from the Mabit that this also applies even if the Haskama was in front of Bezdin to do good yogud. And it's not considered Gemar Din if they agreed in front of Bezdin to do good yogud in a specific price. But if one person already brought cash, then to finalize a good yogud, and even though there was no kinyan made, then he says, the Erech HaShulchan says at that point there is a machlekes that we could start arguing if there is a Gemar. If there is it is considered like a Gemar Din. It's not considered like a Gemar Din because the person could back out or can't back out.
What is that Gemar Din?
If there's a kinyan made. You didn't learn it yet, but next you're going to learn when it comes to Din of Mitzvah that there's no Din of Mitzvah by a woman because it's not the minhag of a woman to be involved in business deals. Yeah? The Pamayna Zav says even though by Din of Mitzvah we don't say good, but we don't say that Din of Mitzvah by a woman, when it comes to good yogud, we do say that a woman can't say, hey, there's no good yogud by me because just like it's bar mitzvah. Why is that? Because he says good yogud is a din, bar mitzvah is a sisa yosher v'atoiv. But again, that's based on the svara, like the Kesef HaKotshim, that good yogud is a din. According to the Erech Shai, that good yogud is only a takana. The Shailef Take, you could say that by a woman or not. Lamaisa, nobody disagrees on that everybody holds that even by a woman you could say. The Erech Shai himself holds later that brings cases where a woman, there is good yogud even by a woman. So it must be that it's not directly connected to dinah or takana according to the Erech Shai, but according to the Mishkan, according to the Pamayna Zav and the Mishkan Sarayim, the difference between is because whether Sisa Yoshev Atoiv versus Din.
Versus what?
Versus Din.
No, but according to things that's not a din.
According to Erech Shai, it's not a Din. Erech Shai says still, he brings examples of good, so it could be that it's not relevant. Even by Takana, we still do it. Only maybe Sisa Yoshev Atoiv is an exception. The Mechaber continues, if the Teveya claims good yogud, but it's a fake good yogud, he doesn't want to buy, he has no money to buy. He only wants to sell his part. So he knows that the shutuf is not interested in selling, in buying his half, but he wants out. So he claims good yogud, And he hopes that the other guy is going to buy it. And when the other guy says, no, I don't want to buy it, I want to sell to you. And he says, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the money. He says, so then we can't force the other person to buy his half. The good yogurt doesn't work halfway. Unless the Mechaber says, he could say, if I don't have money to buy your part, so either buy my part, or I'm going to borrow money and buy your part, or I'm going to then afterwards sell to others the whole thing, and they'll be able to, and they will then buy it. The Rama then right away brings that, Yeshayimrim, that if you don't have money, you can't say good yogurt. You can't say good yogurt for the purpose of borrowing. You can never say good yogurt for the purpose of borrowing. What does it mean? When you want to buy it for the purpose of selling it to other people. Not if you want to buy it for yourself, and you could borrow money, according to the Rama. When the Rama says no good yogurt, there's no good yogurt when you don't have money, it's only on the second half of the last words of the Mechaber that's good yogurt for the purpose of me, I'm going to force a good yogurt, I'm going to borrow money to buy your half, and I'm going to sell the whole thing to somebody else. That, the Rama says we don't say good yogurt. So in such a case, if the person has no money, he has to sell his part without the good yogurt. Then the Rama continues and says what you already know, that you can't do good yogurt less than the value. Why? Because if you're going to do good yogurt less than the value, what's going to happen? A rich person is going to come and is going to force a sale on the poor person and cause a loss to the poor person. And the poor person is not going to be able to make he's not going to be able to buy it. So he's basically saying a lowball number, knowing that the poor person cannot even buy his half of the lowball, and he's going to lowball him and take it out of him. The Shoshanas Yaakov says this din that
This is a right to the bush that you can't say 75-25%.
Why not? You're not causing anybody to lose when it's a value. The Shoshanas Yaakov over here says that everything that Rama writes is only according to the Yeshayimlim. But according to the Mechaber, you could say good yogurt even less than the value. The Erech Lechem also understands it that way. That you could say, according to the Mechaber, you could say good yogurt for less than the value. The Mater Shimon over here says that being that there are those that understand, there are those shittas that hold that good yogurt could be even less than the value, then the Teveya could say kimli like those opinions. And it makes no sense to me, because how could you say kimli lahoitzi? I don't know how, but I'm just telling you. Huh?
Who says you can say kimli?
Mata Shimon. A Teveya could say kimli, and it makes no sense to me how a Teveya could say kimli to force the other guy to sell for less. But that's what huh?
We never say Tevek can say kimli.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. But the Mata Shimon says you could. So I don't understand. I'm just pointing it out to you that it exists. Such an opinion exists. In case someone comes up and tells you where it is, don't think it's an Amaretz or is a just he got it from somewhere.
Well, hopefully it's hard to say that this is the only one according to the Rama. What's the connection to the two dinim in the Rama? You're saying Lunkalach Eidin? You're saying that's totally possible Shabbos?
Yeah.
What's the connection? Two different things.
The Shoshanas Yaakov understands that according to the Mechaber, the good yogurt, being that the person has a right, that good yogurt basically, a person has latitude to do whatever he wants with good yogurt. He could then go, and because he could go borrow money, buy it, to be able to flip it to somebody else. So therefore, when if a guy comes and says, there's no such a thing that a poor person is going to lose. Because that person is never going to lose. How can a poor person lose? Faket. The rich person thinks he's going to throw the poor person out by a low ball. The poor person is going to say, no problem. I'm going to go now and borrow money and buy it. And flip it to somebody else. Yeah, because he has the option to borrow, to sell, borrow, buy and sell, so there'll never be a loss. That's what Shoshanas Yaakov understands. Interesting way of understanding the Rama. The Shach over here, Sifkot and Vav, says that a rich person could tell a poor person good or good. Yeah. Even though he is that everything that we said until now is when a poor person tells a rich person good or good, then he can't. That's what the Ramah says. You can't say when you have no mois, you can't say good or good. It only applies if you're the teveya. Because you can't be a teveya to do good or good, and then say I'm going to borrow money and buy and sell. Only applies in that scenario when you're only the Ramah only talks about when you're the teveya. When you're the nitva, it's fine. And then the Sivis adds to it. In such a case, the nitva, if the nitva is the poor person, he could come and he could say, I'll go and buy and sell to somebody else. And it's not in contradiction to the Ramah. That B, why? Because he's going to be able to find somebody else who's going to pay more. Yeah, so therefore, when the rich person offers, yeah, because now he says if there is somebody who's offering to pay more, then the Siva says if somebody is offering to pay more, and then the rich person could come, and then when the rich person offers a certain price, so the rich person says good yago to the poor person because he wants to get him out, and he offers the right value. The poor person then finds out he offers a real value. The poor person then finds out that he could sell it, buy it, borrow money, buy it from the rich person at value, but he could flip it to somebody else for an extra $100,000. So that at that point, he is no longer losing. The only way so therefore the Ramah's din doesn't apply. But if the person is poor, if you're going to force the poor person to sell because he cannot borrow, then the poor person is going to lose. So when a rich person initiates good yagud against the poor person has the right to borrow, and this is the svara of the Nesivos. Because the poor person could find somebody else and flip the property to him and make money from him, that means that if you're going to force him to sell, you're forcing him to lose. And the Nesivos says that the value of the price that the rich person gives as value is considered no longer shavi, it's going to pachas b'shavi. That's what the Nesivos explains it. Again.
You said the Asher Ani, who could be different than the other one?
Okay, the Shach explains that the Ramah says that you can't say that if you have no money, you can't say good or yogurt for the purpose of borrowing money and selling to somebody else is only if the Ani initiated the good or yogurt. If the Ani initiates the good or yogurt, he can't say elve ekne ve'emker lachere. But if a rich person initiates good yagud against the poor person and he offers him, then the poor person could go and borrow and buy and sell. And the Sivas explains why. What's this logic behind it? What's the logic why a poor person could say, even according to the Ramah, a poor person could say, I'm going to borrow, buy your part and sell. He says because being that the poor person has now somebody else that he could flip it to, what does that mean? What's the poor person's status now? That his half is not worth the 100,000 that the rich person offered him, it's worth 120,000. Why? Because potentially somebody else in the street is going to buy the whole thing from him. So if you're going to say that the poor person is forced to sell it to him because he can't borrow money to buy it, he's the nitva, and being that he can't borrow money, he can't save himself, he's now losing. The Nesiv is mechadash that the rich person, even though he offered value, became like somebody who's lowballing. By preventing the poor person from borrowing, he became a lowballer, and therefore doesn't work. But but that's why you have to allow him to borrow it. That's the svara of the Nesivos. The Kesef HaKodshim says the same din from a different svara. And he says it's nothing to do with, you can't say that the rich person is doing pachos mishavir. Just simple. If you're not going to do it, you're causing a hefset to the poor person. He's going to lose his house, whatever it is. But not because of that reason. The Shoshanas Yaakov actually says the svara of the nesivis makes no sense. Why? He says, even though he paskins like the nesivis, but he says the svara makes no sense. He says price is not determined by a single person. The fact that I have now a client that could go and could buy it is going to go and purchase it for an extra $100,000 or extra $200,000, I could flip it, doesn't mean that the value went up. It means that somebody is willing to pay more for it. The value remains the value. So to say that because I found somebody else who's willing to buy it at a flip for more, suddenly the usher became offering pachas mishevi makes no sense. Now, but if the ani initiates good or yogurt and he doesn't have money to pay, the halacha is that he has to sell. Why does he have to sell? Yeah, he can't say good or yogurt. The Smeh explains that basically, according to the Ramah, good or yogurt could only work if the teveya says, I want to buy it for purposes of me being able to use it. And not when he says, according to the Ramah, it's only when he says, I'm buying it for me to use myself, not when I'm buying it to somebody else. Good yogurt is a takane for a person who wants to buy it for himself, not for somebody else. If you're tight for money, sell your part. That's fine. It's not a problem. That you could do even according to the Ramah. So now what happens is what he can do is, based on the Smeh, this is the way the Nesivis understands, and Chidushim of Kotim, the way the Nesivis understands the Smeh, the Ani could sell his chelik to a rich person, and then the rich person could force good or yagud. That's how the Nesivis understands it, and the Shach agrees with this sort of. Now, we said that the Ramah says you can't say good or yagud pachas mishevi. The Pischei Tshuva brings from the Maharam Ziskind that, what does this mean? He says this is how it works. That if there's, what does it mean? It says if he brings from Maharam Ziskind an additional twist to it. Let's say one person is willing to buy the whole property for 400, but the value is a little bit less than that. Each half, the rich person is offering to buy the chelik for, let's say, 180. So even though the poor person's chelik is worth 180, being that there is somebody who's willing to buy the whole thing for 400, so the rich person can't say good or yagud and force the poor person out. But if it's the other way around, let's say the half is worth 200, but the full property together is only worth 360. Then, if the usher initiates good or yagud at 200, we force him to buy it at 200, and even though the rich person is going to lose, we still say we only say not to lose by the poor person, not by the rich person. That's the shit of the Maharam Ziskind. Now, this is all according to the Ramah. According to the Mechaber, we already said, according to the Mechaber, the poor person could even initiate good or yagud and say, I'm going to borrow money for the purpose of buying it and selling it to somebody else. So the Smeh, that's how the Smeh obviously explains it. Obviously it means that the poor person is going to borrow money to be able to sell it to somebody else. But the poor person can't come and say good or yagud and say, I want to sell my part to Pliny ben Pliny, and I'm doing good yogurt to force you to sell your half to that same Pliny ben Pliny also. That doesn't work. Even according to the Mechaber, for sure not according to the Ramah. Now, another interesting point over here, the Paman Zav brings from Zecher LaAvram in the name of Knesset Agdela, that if a person says also good yogurt, he wants to do good, based on what we said before, that good yagud is only when it's for my use, not for somebody else. If I say good yagud because I want to buy the whole property, so I could rent it out to somebody else, the full property, and make all the profit from it, We don't say Gudei Yagud in such a scenario. Can't force Gudei Yagud in such a thing. We cancel the Gudei Yagud. There's an interesting Mata Shimon in the name of Edus B'Yakov, that if by me saying Gudei Yagud, I'm causing the other person to pay more taxes or to pay more expenses, to register it in the government, whatever it is, whichever way it is, then there's no Gudei Yagud because I'm causing a hezek. The Mata Shimon also brings in the name of the Marashdam that when in a shul you can't say Gudei Yagud. If people who own a shul, private shul, and they get into a fight, one can't say Gudei Yagud to the other person. You can't do Gudei Yagud in a shul. There's an interesting discussion about a Sefer Torah. If you could say,
Where is this right on Mazik? You can't think of it. You haven't mentioned it. The Shtam is saying everything is good. It's because you're getting a loss.
if I'm going to cause somebody else a loss, and I'm not willing to cover it, l'chayra, the Mata Shimon doesn't say those words, but that's the svara behind it. I can't force you good or yagud if I'm going to cause one person. I say buy it or sell it, and by me selling it to you, I'm going to cause you a big tax event, and I'm not willing to pay the tax event. So you can't be koifer good or yagud. You could agree on good or yagud. You can't be koifer good or yagud. You can't be koifer hefsed on somebody. You can never be koifer hefsedim. How can you be koifer hefsed? There's an interesting tshuva from the Heiris Nosan Gestetner from Bnei Brak. Chelik Ches, Siman Kuf Yud Beis Kuf Tes Vav. There was a shul, which had a small shul, and the people got together to buy a Sefer Torah. And then the shul got too small. So a group of mispalim moved out of the shul and built a much bigger shul. Happens to be the majority of the mispalim moved out and built a bigger shul. They had a fancy Sefer Torah that they all bought together. And now the majority says, we paid for the Sefer Torah, we want the Sefer Torah. The minority says, we have a right in it. So yes, in the end of the if you have the whole discussion about a Sefer Torah, if you could move it back and forth. The question is if it's good yagud in a Sefer Torah or not. If you could do good yagud in such a scenario. The Heiris Nosan was asked this question. Not the second shul is bigger. The first one say, hey, yes, you're the majority. Maybe we want the Sefer Torah. The Svaras Lakan Lakan. And he said there is good yagud. The Heiris Nosan said you could say good yagud in such a thing. And he says even though by shutfim we don't say good yagud, usually, even though he says a majority of people hold it by shutfim we say good yagud. Even those that say that you don't say good yagud by shutfim, in this scenario they will say that. Why? Because there's only good yagud by shutfim, according to the people that say there's no good yagud by shutfim, is only if there's no significant change in the shutfas, in the way a significant event, which you're going to soon see. Kesef HaKachim says a similar svara. But if there was a significant change in the shutfas, even the people which hold good yagud, there's no good yagud by shutfim, will still say over here there's good yagud. Therefore he paskins that you could even force a good yagud regarding this Sefer Torah. Obviously you have less people in the old shul and that still had a right to it, more people in the new shul, so they'll work out in the percentages whichever way it has to be. And he says and you can't say good, kimli, like the people who say good yagud, there's no good yagud by shutfim. In this case, he says this is all the shittas asovrim that there is no good yagud by shutfim. He says even now they can't say kimli, and even those that say you could say kimli over here they can't say kimli. Yeah, but what's the svara way you can't say kimli l'chayre? The way I understand it, and the Heiris Nosan doesn't write it. First of all, because some Bichlal say that you don't, well, I believe you can't say kimli in such a thing, because first of all you can't say, some people Bichlal don't hold it as shutfim. We already know that some people hold you can't say kimli in such a scenario. Secondly, because it's a significant change, which is what the svara of the Heiris Nosan and the svara of the Kesef HaKachim, which you're soon going to see. And the third reason is, be'etzim, you could argue that the people in the old shul the old shul has a certain muchzakas in the Sefer Torah. And you can't say kimli against the muchzak. Why? Because it's in the shul. There's certain muchzakas to it. They could argue muchzakas over here. Anyways, let's continue. continue another few nekudas over here. Another thing, interesting thing from the Mata Shimon. If Reuven rented out his part to somebody else, and he moved out. Reuven and Shimon were partners in the Chatzir. Reuven rented out his half to Levi and moved out. So Mata Shimon says, in the name of the Rashbash and the Marash Sarur, that you can't say Gudei Agud. Why? Because there's no more Hezek Re'iyah. So, no more Hezek Re'iyah. How could Shimon, who's not there anymore, say Gudei Agud? The aside of Gudei Agud is Hezek Re'iyah. Yeah, and the Lav Dafka to still it to the Smeh over here. You might be able to say it even according to the Smeh, that holds that even when there's no Hezek Re'iyah, you still say Gudei Agud. We're talking about regarding when there's an issue of Shalom Bayis, because there's no, you could say that the Smeh is following the Svara similar to the Chasam Sofer, that the Gudei Agud was solved to solve Shalom Bayis problems. But over here, even that Svara doesn't exist. Forget about Hezek Re'iyah. Even the second Svara doesn't exist because he's not there. He rented out to somebody else. The Mata Shimon also says over there another thing: if they remain shutfim partially in this property, you still can't say Gudei Agud on part of it. You can't say partial Gudei Agud. Let's say I want to do Gudei Agud on part of the property. Now, I mentioned the Kesef HaKochim. What is the Kesef HaKochim? So the Kesef HaKochim over here mentions a scenario where there was two people who were shutfim in a house and the house got burnt. And you need a lot of money to repair the house. And one person is poor. So he says, even though they're shutfim, the Kuli Alma will say Gudei Agud. Why? Even though they say there's no Gudei Agud by shutfim, here they'll say Gudei Agud. Why? Because Gudei Agud is not b'mashin ischadesh achar kach. That this shitta is only shutf is the lashon of the Kesef HaKochim. It's the end of the Kesef HaKochim on this for the big Kesef HaKochim on this sif, on sif vav. And he says because even those that hold there's no Gudei Agud by shutfim is not b'mashin ischadesh achar kach. It's only if the shutfis remains as what it is. Why? Because the whole sort of Gudei Agud by no Gudei Agud by shutfim is because they thought about it mechatchila, they're going to be shalom bayis. But over here there's no such a svara. Let's move to Sif Zayin. If both want to sell and neither of them want to buy, you sell to somebody else. Yep. Simple din. Then the Sivis asks, what's the big chiddush? Such a simple din over here. What's the big chiddush over here? Sif cotton test. If both agree, what's the nothing to say? And he says no. There's a chiddush over here that the Rama wants to say. If Reuven has a person who's willing to, Reuven wants to sell his half for 100 to his friend, and Shimon has somebody who's willing to sell, who's willing to buy the whole property for 250. That's the example he says, for 250, because it's a big property together. Shimon could force Reuven and say, you can't sell your half to Reuven. You can't sell your half to your friend. Why? Because by you selling your half to your friend, you're causing me a hefsed. And it's based on Chasam Sofer that Gudei Agud only applies that the din of Gudei Agud only applies when the zenan of Zelech Chasa. That's svara. Yeah, I mean the Sivas doesn't quote the Chasam Sofer, it's the same svara. Yeah? Reuven and Shimon are both there. Neither of them want to buy the other one. Each of them want to sell. Each one says, I'm not buying a property. Actually, I want to sell you my property. Nobody wants to buy it. So we say you sell it to somebody else. Yeah, that makes sense. So the Nesiva says, what we're talking about over here is, the chiddush that he tells you is that this is how Nesiva understands, that if Reuven wants to sell it to his buddy for 100, Shimon is able to get a customer for the whole thing together for 250, then Shimon could force Reuven that he should sell it, that we should sell the whole property together to get 250. And Sif Ches. Now, what happens if neither of them want to sell? Each one wants to buy the other person's property, the other half, or one person doesn't want to buy, doesn't want to sell. He just wants to remain a shutuf. He says tav l'meitav. Yeah, I'm not interested in a get from my shutuf. You're bad, but your replacement is going to be worse. So if it's a place which is made to rent out, you rent it out. So the Mechaber says, the Rama adds on to it, and one person could do Gudei Agud and Schirus. That means he could say, now we're going to rent it out, right? So you rent out my half for kach v'kach, or I will rent out your half for kach v'kach. And it works. And the Rama Stam says that whenever you're able to do gudei agud, it's better than making these kinds of chalukas and these kinds of keeping trouble brewing for a long time. It's a very interesting klal that Rama throws up at Derech Agav. When there's problems in shutfa, sometimes this is when it comes, there's no mizbeach merid mois when there's a get between shutfim. So Rama says when it's better to do gudei agud in such a scenario. The Erech Shai over here brings a svara from the Shara Mishpat. Since we're talking about the get, we'll move to that. We'll segue to that nekuda. If you have a man and a wife, a man and a woman, not married to each other, unrelated, who are partners in a certain house, and neither of them wants to sell. Each one wants to buy the other person's half. He says the woman second class to the man. That's what Shara Mishpat says. Why? Based on the svara, when a woman gets divorced, and she can't live in the same chatzir as the husband, right? Ex-husband. And the Gemara, the Gemara says, and the Shulchan Aruch Paskins in Kufyu Tes, never has a Kufyu Tes Sifid Aleph, Ha'isha nitches mipnei ish. That means that when there's a male and a female, when it comes to real estate, the woman is second class. That's what the Shara Mishpat says. The Erech Shai says, what does that have to do with anything? It completely makes no sense. In a chatzir, it's a shayla mitzad znus. That's what we say. Chashash, they're going to talk about mitzad znus. And therefore, we say, ha'ish nitches mipnei ha'ish. So people shouldn't talk about her. But the stam isha, which is not married to you, is not divorced from you, this thing is not, we don't say that she's nitches mipanav. Yeah, and it continues. Now we're going to get to another Nekud in the Erech Shai. We're going to get to in a minute. Yeah, this is the Erech Shai disagrees. This is what the Erech Shai says on the Shara Mishpat. It says, therefore, no, it remains the same as regular partners. You don't say that there's a female partner has less rights than the male partner. The Mechaber says if it's a place, now it's a place which is not made to be rented out, like a chutzner or a house or a store or a house, but they can't live together in the same place, so you rent, so each person gets a year in there. Year. Why? Because you can't split it, and you don't do every 30 days because it's a headache. They can't be in the same property together because it has a kriya, and there's no din chalukah, so therefore, there's no din chalukah, and each person, if they're going to stay together, each person is going to be mazik the other person, like Taz explains, but has a kriya, so therefore you do year. And the Rama says that Yeshemim and the Chatzir, they do have to continue using it together because each person is meshubah to the house that's sitting on his side of the Chatzir, and therefore there's a discussion in what parts of the Chatzir is gudei agud or not. Yeah, over here happens the Shara Mishpat, not the Shara Mishpat. Over here the Shara Mishpat over here also says that a female gets if there's a shana, the man gets first rights over there. Why? Because tiltul the gavra is kasher tiltul the itzah, the shit in Gemara. And the Erech Shai says doesn't apply over here either. They're both equal. It's nothing to do with it. You can't say that the wife, that the woman is not loses out because of it. Now, what happens if before this fight, one person lived over there himself, and now the second one wants to take him out of there? And the first one says, you can't take me out. We were partners, but I was the one who was living here. You were out of town all the time. So the Pamayne Zov says that, look, according to many Paiskim, the first one does not have the right to say, I'm staying here and I'll pay your rent. No, once the Chalukah kicks in, then the second one could force the first one to move out and start doing the chalukah back and forth. However, it's only if he's going to actually come and live there. He can't come and say, I'm throwing you out for 1 year, I'm going to rent it out to somebody else. That's not. Same svara. L'shita say that, we already know it also from the Ramah, that gudei agud, mashmas and mechaber, gudei agud is only when a person is doing it for his own sake. Pischat Tshuva brings an interesting story from the Chasam Sofer. Chashmish Mitzim Kufayin Tes, shutfim which had a house, 2 floors, and they made a deal with the Ganta fight. They made a deal 2 years, Reuven lives on the bottom floor and Shimon lives on the top floor. 2 years, Reuven lives on the top floor and Shimon lives on the bottom floor. And one time, before they made the switch, the top floor burnt down and got completely destroyed. And you can't live there anymore. So now Reuven is downstairs, but there's a year and a half left, and Shimon has nowhere to live. Do we recalculate everything or not? Chazon Sofer says no. It's pashut that whoever has now the Eibishter steward on him that he's going to have the top floor for this year and a half, lost out. Why? Because the Chalukah made a birur lemafreya that this is this person's chelik for these 2 years, this is this person's chelik for these 2 years. And therefore, the fact that one person right now lost out, Elamai, when the 2 years are up, if they didn't fix the second floor, then it flips around. So Reuven, who lived downstairs, now doesn't have a house. Shimon gets 2 years in the bottom floor. And they continue, now it becomes only one floor, and they will continue switching back and forth only on that floor until they will renovate the top floor. The Paman Zav says that that's how it's paskin in Zera Yaakov. Also, the Sivas HaMishpat brings it in square bracket. It's like a Hisaf in the Sivas HaMishpat. It seems like he didn't quote from the Chazon Sofer. It seems like it's his own Chiddush also. The Sivas HaMishpat throws an interesting comment over here in Chiddushim Sivkot and Yudal, like 4 words. He says the fact that, he says, this, I'm paraphrasing the Sivas, the fact that the Shulchan Aruch put the din of Shoichnim Shana Shana after the din of Schirus, mashma that the svara of Schirus is stronger. If you're able to do Soichrim to somebody else, it's better than living, than switching off 1 year, 1 year. Mata Shimon points out that there are those shittas which hold that there's bechal no switching back and forth. But the Mata Shimon says, being the Tzad mentioned Shulchan Aruch, nobody could say Kimli like that. But there's a little bit left in the Seif, but there is no time left, so we will stop here. According to the plan, there's going to be another shir on Tuesday, Mirz Hashem.